You don't belong here, boy. Go find the bus station. Preston Carmichael didn't lower his voice. The words cut through the low hum of the ethereous executive lounge like a blade across silk. Conversations stalled. Crystal glasses paused mid-air. A jazz trio in the corner missed a note. Rain hammered the glass walls of the private terminal at Teterboro, turning the outside world into a gray blur. Inside, everything was marble, leather, and curated quiet. Damian Sterling opened one eye. From his seat in the far corner, half hidden behind a towering fiddle-leaf fig, he saw polished shoes first, Italian leather, immaculate, then tailored navy trousers, then the sharp jawline of a man who had never been ignored in his own domain. "Wake up!" Preston snapped. "This isn't a motel." Damian exhaled slowly and sat up. His hoodie, charcoal gray, cuffs frayed, clung damply to his shoulders. Mud stained the soles of his worn running shoes from the morning hike he'd taken to clear 48 hours of sleepless negotiation from his head. "I'm waiting for my flight," Damian said, voice rough from exhaustion. "Is there a problem?" "The problem," Preston replied, gesturing vaguely at Damian's entire existence, "is that this lounge is restricted to private aviation clients, not drivers, not luggage handlers, and certainly not." He let the sentence hang, eyes traveling down to the mud. Across the room, a hedge fund banker with a heavy watch chuckled into his scotch. An influencer by the window lifted her phone slightly, sensing content. Damian rubbed his face, buying a second of patience. "I'm a client," he said evenly. "My plane's landing shortly. Check the manifest. Sterling." Preston barked a laugh. "Sterling? We have a Lord Sterling arriving from London and a Senator Sterling departing for D.C. Neither of them looked like they just crawled out of a campground." A few scattered laughs followed. The waitress, Sarah, according to the small name tag pinned to her black blouse, stood frozen a few feet away, a cup of coffee trembling on her tray. "I was about to bring him water," she said softly. "Take it back," Preston ordered without looking at her. "We do not serve trespassers." Damian's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. He had just signed a $3 billion merger in a windowless warehouse in Newark. The ink wasn't dry yet. The adrenaline had evaporated, leaving bone-deep fatigue. All he wanted was 10 quiet minutes before wheels down. He glanced around the lounge. Investment bankers in tailored suits, a rapper arguing into a gold-plated phone, an oil executive scrolling through Instagram under recessed lighting designed to flatter net worth. He could buy the building across the street. He could buy the building he was standing in. But he didn't argue. He had a rule. Never negotiate with idiots in public. "I pay $50,000 a year for landing rights and lounge access," Damian said calmly. "Check under Sterling Dynamics." Preston's smile sharpened. "Sterling Dynamics," he repeated loudly, inviting the room in. "He probably fixes the vending machines." More laughter. The banker raised his glass. "Get him out of here, Carmichael. He smells like wet dog." The rain intensified against the glass, wind driving it sideways. The lounge lights reflected off the slick tarmac outside. Preston stepped closer, invading Damian's space. "I'm going to count to 3, he said. "If you're not walking toward the exit, I'll have airport police drag you out. They're bored tonight. They'd love the exercise." Damian stood. At 6'2", he rose higher than Preston expected. For a flicker of a second, Preston's shoulders tensed. Then the smirk returned. "You're making a mistake," Damian said quietly. "The only mistake," Preston replied, "was letting you in." The room had gone silent now. Not sympathetic. Curious. Damian looked around one last time. He saw amusement, disdain, pity. Sarah's expression lingered the longest. That almost bothered him more than the insults. "Fine," Damian said. He brushed a speck of lint from his hoodie, lifted his duffel bag, and walked toward the glass doors. "Not through the main entrance," Preston called after him. "Use the service exit. I don't want you walking past first-class guests." Damian didn't turn around. The automatic doors slid open with a soft, mechanical sigh. Cold air knifed in. Rain roared louder, immediate and unforgiving. He stepped onto the curb. The overhang shielded part of him, but wind whipped water across his sweatpants within seconds. His hoodie darkened, heavy with rain. Inside, through the floor-to-ceiling glass, Preston adjusted his tie and smoothed his cuffs. He said something to the banker that made the small circle laugh again. Preston pointed toward the window. "Toward Damien." The laughter rippled. Damien stood very still. Water streamed from the edge of his hood, down his nose, onto the concrete. The tarmac beyond shimmered under runway lights. Lightning flickered somewhere in the distance, but no thunder followed. He pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen glowed blue against the storm. He dialed. Inside the lounge, Preston turned away from the window, satisfied. He gestured to a staff member to wipe down the leather chair Damien had occupied. "Standards," he said loudly. "We maintain standards." Outside, the rain drummed harder against the roof. Damien lifted the phone to his ear. Behind the glass, none of them noticed the faint vibration beginning to hum through the soles of their shoes. It wasn't thunder. Not yet. Captain Ali. Rain hissed across the curb as Damien pressed the phone closer to his ear. Water ran down the back of his neck, cold and deliberate. "Mr. Sterling," the pilot's voice came through clear, steady, controlled. "We're on final approach. 4 minutes out. Are you in the lounge?" Damien looked through the glass. Inside, Preston Carmichael was pouring champagne for the banker, laughing like a man who had just restored order to civilization. "I'm not in the lounge," Damien said. "I've been evicted." A brief silence. "Not confusion, calculation." "Evicted, sir? The terminal manager believes I'm a vagrant." Another pause. Shorter this time. Tighter. "Would you like me to contact airport authority?" Ali asked. "No." Damien wiped rain from his eyes with the back of his hand. "I want you to make an entrance." He could almost hear the pilot straighten in his seat. "Understood. Assigned runway 1 to 9. That brings us past the main terminal windows." "Good," Damien said. His voice had lost its fatigue. "Don't feather the throttle on taxi. Bring her straight to Gate 1. "Gate 1? Ali repeated. "That's unconventional." "I'll cover unconventional. A beat." "Yes, sir." "And Ali." "Sir." "Let them know we're here." The call ended. Damien lowered the phone. Through the rain-streaked glass, Preston raised his flute in mock toast. The small crowd near him laughed again. The gesture was theatrical, curated like everything else about him. He had no idea. Preston didn't know that the soaked man on the curb had signed a $3 billion merger less than 12 hours ago. He didn't know that Sterling Dynamics infrastructure processed the data flowing through half the financial institutions represented in that room. And he definitely didn't know that the aircraft descending through the storm answered to the man he'd just thrown out. The vibration grew stronger. At first it was subtle, just a tremor beneath the concrete. Then the glass panels began to hum, a low-frequency resonance that made the champagne in Preston's hand shiver. Inside, a few heads turned toward the windows. "What is that?" the influencer asked, lowering her phone. The banker frowned. "Storm's getting worse." But the sky didn't flash. Instead, twin white beams pierced through the rain like searchlights, cutting a path through smoke. The ground frequency radio at the concierge desk crackled to life. "Attention all ground units. Clear taxiway Alpha and Bravo. Priority 1. Heavy arrival. Repeat, Priority 1. Preston stiffened. "Priority 1? He muttered. "Is the president diverting?" Greg, the receptionist, typed quickly. "Nothing on the schedule, sir." The radio crackled again, louder this time. "Gulfstream G700 inbound. Call sign Kingpin 1. Requesting direct taxi to Aetherius Gate 1. Preston blinked. "Gate 1? He repeated. Gate 1 was ceremonial. Reserved for heads of state, royalty, rare visits that demanded spectacle. No one used Gate 1 in weather like this. Outside, the roar intensified. The Gulfstream G700 emerged from the rain like a predator breaking through mist. Midnight blue fuselage, winglets slicing through sheets of water. Landing lights blazing so bright they turned the glass facade into a white wall. The engines did not quiet as it turned. They rose. The rumble rolled through the marble floor, up through leather chairs, into the bones of everyone inside. Arthur Finch stepped back from the window. "He's coming in too fast." Water on the runway sprayed in violent arcs as the jet swung around, nose aligning directly with the terminal's main glass wall. For a heartbeat, it looked like collision. Someone screamed. At the last possible second, the nose dipped. Reverse thrust flared. The aircraft stopped so close the engine heat fogged the glass instantly, turning the lounge into a blurred aquarium of pale faces. Silence fell. The only sound was the deep mechanical wind-down of the Rolls-Royce Pearl 700 engines. Preston's pulse pounded in his ears. "This is a violation," he said sharply, recovering his voice. "This pilot will lose his license." The forward door of the jet opened with hydraulic precision. Stairs unfolded. A flight attendant in pristine navy stepped down, umbrella already open against the rain. She did not look toward the terminal. She looked toward the curb. Damien pushed off from the wall. Water dripped from his sleeves as he walked forward, unhurried. Preston stormed outside, rain instantly plastering his hair to his forehead. "You!" he shouted at the flight attendant. "You are in violation of safety protocol. Move this aircraft immediately." She didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed past him. Damien stepped closer. Preston turned and saw him approaching. "I told you to leave," Preston snapped. "You're trespassing. Police are on their way." Damien didn't break stride. He moved toward the aircraft as if nothing else existed. Preston stepped into his path. "Where do you think you're going? That is a $70 million jet." Damien stopped. Rain slid down his face, but his eyes were steady now, focused. "Get out of my way, Preston." Preston froze. He hadn't given his name. Behind him, the flight attendant's voice carried through the rain, calm and unmistakably formal. "Mr. Carmichael," she said, "please step aside. You are blocking Mr. Sterling's path to his aircraft." The name hung in the storm. "Sterling." Preston turned slowly. On the vertical stabilizer of the jet, just visible between rain streaks and engine heat, was a stylized silver S. The same S printed on the server maintenance contracts he approved every quarter. The same S embossed on invoices that kept the terminal's network alive. Damien stepped around him. The umbrella tilted overhead. "Welcome back, Mr. Sterling," the attendant said. Preston's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The roar hadn't been thunder. It had been ownership arriving. For a moment, no one moved. Rain battered the tarmac. Engine heat rippled the air between jet and glass. The umbrella hovered over Damien like a quiet coronation. Preston felt something unfamiliar creep into his chest. Uncertainty. "This is absurd," he said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "Anyone can paint a logo on a plane." Arthur Finch didn't laugh. He was staring at his phone, thumb moving fast across the screen. Rain tapped against the overhang above them in uneven percussion. "Tail number," Finch muttered. Preston snapped his head toward him. "What?" "The tail number." Finch stepped back under the awning, squinting through the rain at the fuselage. N700KS. His fingers flew. The FAA registry page loaded slowly in the storm. Inside the lounge, guests pressed toward the glass, breath fogging the surface. Sarah stood near the door, tray forgotten in her hands. Finch's screen refreshed. He stopped talking. "Well?" Preston demanded. Finch turned the phone around. "Owner: Sterling Aviation Holdings, LLC. Registered address: Manhattan. Last updated: 19/7 EST." The timestamp glowed at the bottom of the screen. Preston felt his throat tighten. "That doesn't mean—" "It means," Finch cut in quietly, "that's his plane." Behind them, the engines idled at a low, controlled growl. Not aggressive now. Patient. Damien reached the base of the stairs. The flight attendant adjusted the umbrella slightly as wind pushed rain sideways. Preston stepped forward again, grasping for control. "Mr. Sterling," he said, the title tasting unfamiliar. "If there's been a misunderstanding—" Damien paused on the first step. Rain slid off the edge of the umbrella in a clean sheet. "There wasn't," he said calmly. He climbed. Each step was deliberate, measured. The wet fabric of his hoodie clung to his shoulders, but his posture had changed. The fatigue was gone. Something colder had replaced it. The cabin door closed with a solid hydraulic thud. The outside world shrank. Preston stood there in the rain, suit heavy, shoes soaking through. The umbrella had disappeared up the stairs with the man he'd dismissed. Inside the lounge, the atmosphere shifted from spectacle to calculation. Finch lowered his voice. "Do you know who that is?" Preston swallowed. "He's some tech guy." Some tech guy? Finch let out a breathless laugh. He built the back-end infrastructure for the New York Stock Exchange. His servers process billions in transactions daily. Sterling Dynamics runs half the security systems in this airport. Preston felt the rain suddenly colder. That's exaggerated. No, Finch said. It's not. A deep hum vibrated through the floor again. Subtle, controlled. The aircraft wasn't leaving. It was holding position. Preston wiped rain from his eyes and walked back inside, shoulders stiff. The automatic doors sealed shut behind him, muting the storm to a distant hiss. The lounge lights flickered once. Just once. Greg looked down at his monitor. Sir? What now? Preston snapped. My system just... Greg tapped the keyboard. It's frozen. Reboot it. I did. Across the room, the digital menu boards at the bar blinked black. The CNN feed on the central display dissolved into static. A few guests checked their phones. No service, the influencer muttered. My Wi-Fi dropped, the rapper said. Preston's jaw clenched. This is weather interference. Finch stared at his own screen. Weather doesn't cut private networks. The concierge desk radio emitted a short burst of static, then died completely. One by one, the wall-mounted displays went dark. The background jazz cut mid-note. Even the ambient lighting dimmed slightly, as if the building itself had taken a breath. What is happening? Someone whispered. Preston felt the room slipping from his grip. This is a place of business, he said loudly. We have redundancies. Greg shook his head. Not like this. The massive central screen flickered back to life. Not news. Not static. A high-definition video feed filled the display. The interior of a Gulfstream cabin appeared cream leather seats, dark wood paneling, soft overhead lighting. And at the center of the frame, seated at a conference table, was Damian Sterling. He was no longer in a hoodie. He wore a navy three-piece suit, crisp white shirt, collar sharp as glass. His hair was dry, composed. A steaming cup of coffee rested beside an open laptop. He looked directly into the camera, which meant he was looking directly at them. Good evening, Damian said. His voice boomed through the lounge's surround sound system, slightly louder than comfortable. Preston's stomach dropped. The image was flawless. No buffering, no distortion. I apologize for the interruption, Damian continued, tone smooth and even. My name is Damian Sterling. Silence swallowed the room. Some of you may remember me, he added, from 20 minutes ago. Finch stepped backward, almost instinctively. Preston opened his mouth to speak to protest, but the microphone icon in the corner of the screen glowed red. Muted. Damian leaned forward slightly, fingers interlaced. I had a very interesting conversation with your terminal manager, he said. Preston felt every pair of eyes in the room shift toward him. The hum from the jet outside continued, low and constant like a reminder. Ownership, Preston realized, did not shout. It controlled the signal. The screen filled the room with a cool, surgical glow. Damian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I was informed, he said evenly, that this lounge maintains strict standards, that it is reserved for owners of the world, not the workers. The words echoed slightly against marble and glass. Preston felt heat crawl up his neck despite the chill still clinging to his rain-soaked suit. Water dripped from his cuffs onto the polished floor, leaving small, dark crescents beneath his shoes. That's out of context, he muttered, though the microphone icon on the screen remained red. Muted. Damian's gaze shifted slightly, as if reading from something just off camera. I happen to agree, he continued. Standards are important. Competence is important. Ownership is important. He let the silence stretch just long enough to tighten throats. This terminal isn't luxury, he added. It's trust. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. When you humiliate a client over optics, Damian went on, you poison the entire system, and Sterling Dynamics doesn't run on poison. Preston's breath shortened. Finch stared at the floor. Damian reached to the side and lifted a tablet. The camera adjusted automatically, sharpening focus. A digital contract filled the screen. Clean lines. Corporate formatting. At the bottom, a timestamp glowed. Executed, 1912 EST. As of 3 minutes ago, Damian said calmly. I have purchased the controlling lease of the Aetherius Teterboro terminal. The room didn't gasp all at once. It fractured. A sharp inhale here, a whispered curse there. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered softly against marble. Preston's knees weakened. That's not possible, he said hoarsely. On screen, Damien tapped the tablet once. The document zoomed slightly, revealing electronic signatures. A second timestamp appeared beneath the first. Funds transferred. Confirmed. I am now, Damien continued, the landlord of the building you are standing in. The engine hum outside deepened for a moment, as if punctuating the sentence. Preston felt something collapse inside his chest. He took a step toward the screen. Mr. Sterling, he began, voice cracking. Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. Damien didn't look at him directly. Instead, he glanced down at his laptop. I can see you, Preston, he said quietly. The security feed inset appeared in the lower corner of the lounge screen. It showed the room from above, crisp, wide angle. It showed Preston soaked, small, pale. You look wet, Damien added. A ripple of restrained discomfort moved through the crowd. It's unpleasant being stuck out in the rain, isn't it? Preston's hands trembled. I was protecting the integrity of the lounge, he said, louder now, desperate to regain footing. We can't just let anyone. You were protecting your vanity, Damien cut in. The interruption was clean, surgical. You judged a book by its cover. You mistook exhaustion for weakness. You mistook modesty for poverty. Preston opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And in my business, Damien continued, eyes darkening slightly, poor judgment is a liability. He tapped a key. A new window expanded on the lounge screen. Employment file. Carmichael. Preston. Preston's breath hitched. That's private, he whispered. My servers don't lie, Damien said. Email headers scrolled into view. Internal complaints. HR warnings. Short notations with dates beside them. Harassment verbal filed 3/11. Tip allocation discrepancy. Audit. Flagged 5 halves. Staff complaint conduct filed. 6/18. Each line appeared with a soft electronic click, like stamps hitting paper. Sarah's eyes widened. Greg stared, frozen. That's fabricated, Preston said weakly. Damien didn't blink. I can see every email you've sent on this network, he replied. Every cent skimmed from catering invoices. Every complaint buried. Finch took a slow step away from Preston. The physical distance said more than words. Preston's voice shrank. I can fix this. Damien leaned back slightly in his seat. Preston Carmichael, he said, tone level. You are terminated, effective immediately, for cause. On screen, a red banner flashed across the employment file. Termination effective immediately. Timestamp, 19:17 est. The room fell silent. Preston swayed. No, he whispered. 2 figures appeared in the security feed behind him. Damien's private security detail, already inside the terminal. They moved with quiet efficiency. You instructed me, Damien continued. That riffraff must use the service exit. Preston's eyes darted toward the hallway. I suggest, Damien added, we honor your standards. The guard stepped forward. Wait, Preston gasped. My office, my car, my... You can walk, Damien said calmly. It builds character. The guards took Preston gently but firmly by the arms. Guests parted instinctively, creating a corridor. Preston's polished shoes squeaked against marble as he was guided toward the back hallway toward the service door he had insisted upon. The kitchen doors swung open. Cold rain hissed through the gap. No, Preston breathed. The service door opened. Wind pushed hard against the frame. He was escorted outside into the same rain, onto the same sidewalk, beyond the same perimeter he had drawn so carefully. The door shut. Inside, the lounge remained still. On screen, Damien's expression softened just slightly. To the rest of you, he said, I apologize for the disruption. He paused. All fuel and landing fees for tonight are covered. A murmur spread. Relief, gratitude, calculation. Damien's eyes shifted once more. Is Sarah still there? She froze near the bar. Yes, she said quietly. He studied her through the lens. I saw you try to help. The engine hum outside steadied again. And that, Damien said, is the only standard that matters. Sarah felt every eye in the room land on her at once. The tray in her hands trembled, glassware chiming softly against porcelain. The central screen still cast Damien's image across marble and chrome, his presence filling the space without raising his volume. "I'm here," she managed. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. Damien studied her through the camera feed. Not her uniform, not the tray, her. "I saw you offer water," he said, "and coffee, even after being told not to." Sarah swallowed. "It was just my job." "No," Damien replied. "It was judgment, the right kind." The room was quiet enough to hear the low vibration from the jet outside, a steady mechanical pulse beneath the floor. "You showed empathy under pressure," he continued. "That is leadership." A faint shift moved through the guest's curiosity, replacing discomfort. Sarah blinked. "Sir, I'm appointing you as terminal manager," Damien said. The words landed like dropped crystal. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere near the bar. Sarah stared at the screen, certain she'd misheard. "I'm just a server," she whispered. "You understand service," Damien corrected. "The rest can be taught." Her fingers loosened. The tray slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a sharp crack. No one flinched at the sound. Preston's absence was already altering the air. "You'll have full operational authority," Damien continued. "Effective immediately. Salary adjusted. Benefits included. My transition team arrives Monday." Greg let out a quiet breath beside the concierge desk. Arthur Finch shifted uncomfortably near the window, the reflection of the jet lights streaking across his gold watch. Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. "I don't know how to run a terminal," she admitted. "You know how to treat people," Damien said. "That's the asset." The word lingered. Asset. Not the marble floors, not the curated guest list, not even the aircraft idling outside. The people. Damien's gaze swept the room once more. "The culture changes tonight," he said. "Respect is not optional, it is operational." The statement didn't echo. It settled. He reached forward, fingers brushing the edge of his laptop. "Greg," he said. Greg startled slightly. "Yes, sir? You'll remain. You followed protocol, but you'll report to Sarah now." Greg nodded quickly. "Understood." Damien shifted his focus again. "Mr. Finch." Finch straightened instinctively. "I trust your challenger is fueled." "It is," Finch said, voice measured. "Good," Damien replied. "Your landing rights remain intact. For now." The subtle emphasis hung in the air. Finch gave a short nod. Outside, the engine tone shifted slightly, an idle adjustment. The aircraft wasn't preparing for departure yet. It was holding, patient, and deliberate. Sarah felt something inside her steady. Fear began giving way to clarity. "What happens next?" she asked. Damien allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "First," he said, "you make sure everyone here is taken care of. Then you review staffing." Her mind moved quickly now. Schedules, vendor contracts, fuel logs, the things Preston had guarded, like secrets. "And Preston?" she asked before she could stop herself. Damien didn't hesitate. "He's no longer your concern." The simplicity of it carried weight. No drawn-out punishment, no dramatic speech, just removal. Sarah inhaled slowly. "Yes, sir." "Good," Damien said. He paused. "And Sarah?" "Yes. Next time I land, I'll take that coffee. Strong." A faint ripple of relieved laughter moved through the room, careful, controlled. The tension fractured. The screen flickered once as Damien reached to end the broadcast. "Welcome to the Sterling Lounge," he said. The feed cut to black. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the Wi-Fi indicator lights blinked back to life one by one along the walls. The digital menu boards illuminated. The central screen returned to its usual feed, though no one paid attention to it. Conversations resumed, but softer now, measured. Greg stepped closer to Sarah. "Manager," he said, testing the word. She let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs for years. "Let's start with the staff schedule," she said quietly. "And call catering. No more pilot coffee charges." Greg's eyebrows rose. "That's operational," she finished. Across the room, Finch slipped his phone back into his pocket, thoughtful. A few guests approached the concierge desk with cautious politeness, as if recalibrating. Outside, the cabin door of the Gulfstream opened briefly. The flight attendant descended the steps alone this time, walking toward the terminal entrance with calm precision. Sarah watched through the glass. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle. The flight attendant entered, shoes leaving small, wet prints on the polished floor. "Miss Miller?" she asked. Sarah blinked. "Yes. A folder for you," the attendant said, handing over a sleek black portfolio embossed with a silver S. "Operational transition documents. Digital copies are already uploaded to your system." Greg glanced at his monitor. It refreshed automatically, new credentials appearing beside Sarah's name. Terminal manager active. Timestamp. Denu. 23 Est. Sarah felt the weight of the folder in her hands. Not heavy, just real. Outside, the engines of the G700 began to spool higher, a controlled crescendo that vibrated faintly through the walls. The aircraft eased backward from the glass, pivoting smoothly toward the taxiway. Guests drifted toward the windows, watching the midnight blue fuselage align with runway lights cutting through mist. The jet accelerated. Spray fanned outward behind it as it gathered speed, nose lifting cleanly into the gray sky. For a moment, it was only lights climbing into cloud. Then it was gone. Inside the terminal, the hum of the engines faded, replaced by the quieter rhythm of recalibrated voices and cautious respect. Sarah looked down at the silver S on the folder. The lounge no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a responsibility. And for the first time that night, the silence inside the building wasn't heavy. It was earned. 3 weeks later, the name above the glass doors had changed. Sterling Lounge. The new lettering was understated, brushed steel, clean font, no gold trim. The marble floors were the same, the leather chairs were the same, but the temperature of the room felt different, warmer, intentional. Sarah stood inside the former manager's office, sleeves rolled up, studying a spreadsheet on one of the wall-mounted monitors. The abstract art that once dominated the space was gone. In its place, whiteboards filled with flight paths, staffing rotations, and handwritten notes. No more curation, just operations. "Fuel reconciliation for tonight is clean," Greg said from the doorway. He wore a simple navy blazer now, no longer stiff with hierarchy. "And catering confirmed pilot coffee is complimentary across the board." Sarah nodded. "Good. Make sure accounting flags the old surcharge line item. Permanently." Greg hesitated. "There's something else." She looked up. Another vendor requested reinstatement of their priority access fee. Said the previous management encouraged it. Sarah didn't smile. Not anymore. Outside, an Embraer taxied past under a pale autumn sky. No storm tonight, just crisp air and clean visibility. Word had spread fast. Traffic was up 18%. Clients who had once split their business between terminals now favored the Sterling Lounge. Not because of spectacle, because of predictability. Respect had proven profitable. Across town, in a different kind of building, Preston Carmichael stared at a flickering, fluorescent light. The regional logistics depot in Newark smelled of diesel and burnt coffee. No marble, no glass walls. Just concrete floors and metal desks scuffed by years of use. He sat inside a small dispatch booth, headset slightly too tight around his temples. A yellow notepad lay open beside him, scribbled with truck arrival times. "Truck 47 inbound," a voice crackled over the radio. Preston adjusted the mic. "Copy, Dock 3. His voice sounded smaller here. A forklift beeped in reverse outside the booth. The noise was constant metal against metal, engines idling, boots scraping against gravel. No champagne glass. No curated silence. He reached for his phone during a lull, reflexively checking notifications. Still there. The video. 3 million views and counting. Lounge manager tries to fight tech god. Loses everything. He had reported it twice. No effect. The comments were worse than the humiliation itself. Arrogant. Deserved it. Karma lands first class. He set the phone down carefully. On the other side of the glass, a group of Teamsters laughed over something one of them had said. Rough laughter, unfiltered. They didn't defer to him. They barely acknowledged him. Mike, the depot supervisor, leaned against the doorway of the booth. "You settling in?" Mike asked. Preston nodded. "Yes." Mike glanced at the notepad. "Good. Just remember these guys don't care about your old title." "I know. Do you?" Mike studied him for a moment. "Because respect here isn't polished. It's earned." Preston swallowed. Outside, a driver walked in carrying a thermos. "Coffee machine's busted," the driver muttered. "Any chance you can make a pot?" Preston hesitated. The request was simple, ordinary. "Yes," he said quietly. He stepped out of the booth, past grease-stained lockers, into the cramped break area. The coffee maker was old, plastic yellowed with time. He measured grounds carefully, too carefully. When he returned with the pot, the driver took it without ceremony. "Thanks." No applause, no hierarchy, just work. Back at Teterboro, Sarah reviewed a stack of printed refund confirmations. The hidden fuel surcharges Preston had quietly implemented over the years had been traced and reversed. Each client had received a personal note. Transparency as policy. Finch entered the lounge that evening for a departure to Chicago. He approached the concierge desk without swagger this time. "Good evening," he said to Greg. "Evening, Mr. Finch." Finch glanced around. The atmosphere was different. Staff moved efficiently but without tension. A jazz trio played again in the corner, softer now, less ornamental. He spotted Sarah near the bar. "Miss Miller?" he said, stepping toward her. "It's Sarah," she replied evenly. "Of course." He adjusted his cuff. "I wanted to say, operations have been seamless." "Glad to hear it." He shifted his weight. "I've been reviewing my firm's tech contracts," Finch added. "We're considering migrating additional infrastructure to Sterling Dynamics." Sarah held his gaze. "I'm sure Mr. Sterling would appreciate the business." Finch gave a small nod. The balance had shifted. Not through spectacle, through consequence. That night, as the last jet departed and the runway lights dimmed slightly, Sarah remained in her office, reviewing weekly metrics. A soft knock came at the door. Greg stepped inside. "There's a package," he said, marked personal. He handed her a plain white envelope. No return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a cashier's check. $4.50. Folded behind it, a piece of lined paper, handwritten. She read silently. "Mr. Sterling, I owe you for a coffee. I am learning that the view from the bottom is different. Not worse, just honest. Preston Carmichael." Sarah exhaled slowly. Greg glanced at the check. $4.50? "Coffee?" she said. She looked toward the runway through the glass. A distant aircraft lifted into the night, red navigation lights blinking against the dark. "Should I forward it to Mr. Sterling?" Greg asked. "Yes." She slid the note back into the envelope. Outside the depot, Preston locked up the dispatch booth at the end of his shift. The air was colder now, autumn settling in. He stood for a moment, listening to trucks idle in the distance. No marble floors, no curated standards, just consequence measured in hours and paychecks. He pulled his jacket tighter around him and started the walk toward the bus stop. This time, no one had to tell him where it was. 6 months later, the air over Teterboro was clean and sharp, autumn sunlight cutting long gold lines across the runway. The Sterling Lounge hummed with controlled energy. Not frantic, not stiff, just precise. A black Airbus H-160 helicopter descended toward the private helipad, rotors slicing the quiet into measured pulses. The downdraft rippled across the terminal glass, rattling the edges faintly before settling. Inside, conversations dipped but didn't freeze. No one panicked, no one whispered. They simply watched. The helicopter touched down softly. The rotors slowed, ticking in metallic rhythm as they lost momentum. The cabin door opened. Damien stepped out in a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans, a slim backpack slung over one shoulder. No suit, no spectacle, just presence. He paused briefly on the tarmac, taking in the building. The new signage caught the sun cleanly. Sterling Lounge. The doors slid open before he reached them. "Welcome back, Mr. Sterling," Greg said from behind the concierge desk, genuine warmth in his voice. Damien bumped fists with him lightly. "How are the night classes?" Greg smiled. "Midterms next week." "Good." Keep going. Damien stepped into the lounge fully. The scent of polished wood and fresh coffee blended with faint jet fuel drifting in from outside. A jazz trio played near the window, subtle, restrained. The energy felt balanced. He scanned the room instinctively. Guests spoke to staff without sharp edges. Pilots chatted at the bar without being charged for espresso. No one looked hunted. Sarah approached from the far side, tablet in hand. "You're early," she said. "Tailwind," Damien replied. He glanced toward the runway. "Revenue? Up 18% year over year. Client retention is highest in the region." He nodded once. "And staffing? Turnover dropped to 3%, she said. "We restructured onboarding. Culture interview first, skills second." Damien allowed a small, approving exhale. "Good." They walked toward the window together. Outside, a Gulf Stream rolled past in the distance, not his, just another aircraft in a busy sky. Sarah handed him a thin envelope. "This arrived yesterday," she said, marked personal. Damien recognized the handwriting before he opened it. He unfolded the note quietly. Same careful script. He had read it once already when Greg forwarded the scanned copy, but paper felt different, more deliberate. The cashier's check slipped slightly in his fingers. $4.50. He read the final line again. "The view from the bottom is honest." Sarah studied his face. "What will you do?" Damien folded the note carefully, placing it back inside the envelope. "Nothing dramatic," he said. Outside, the afternoon light shifted warmer. "Is he stable?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "He's still at the depot. Dispatcher now. No complaints from supervisors." Damien considered that. Consequence had already done its work. Humiliation fades. Habits remain. "Keep monitoring," he said. "In a year, if the trajectory holds, schedule an interview." "For here?" Sarah asked. "Not here," Damien replied. "Somewhere smaller, where accountability is daily." She smiled faintly. Across the lounge, Arthur Finch entered through the glass doors. This time, no entourage, no raised voice. He approached Damien directly. "Mr. Sterling." "Arthur." Finch glanced around the space. "I've moved our cybersecurity infrastructure fully to Sterling Dynamics." Damien's expression didn't change. "Smart decision." Finch hesitated. "I also wanted to say..." Damien raised a hand slightly. "You've already adjusted behavior," he said. "That's enough." Finch nodded, almost relieved, and stepped away toward the bar. The helicopter rotors outside had fully stilled. The tarmac shimmered lightly under late sun. "Your jet's ready," Sarah said. "Good." They walked toward the private exit. At the threshold, Damien paused and looked back across the lounge. Greg, assisting a pilot with flight clearance paperwork. A junior staff member laughing softly with a catering vendor. No forced smiles. No rigid hierarchy. Just motion. Operational. Sarah followed his gaze. "It works," she said quietly. "It scales," Damien corrected gently. He stepped out onto the tarmac. The G700 stood waiting farther down the apron, midnight blue against amber light. Captain Ali stood near the stairs, reviewing a checklist on a tablet. "Sir," Ali greeted as Damien approached. "Evening, Captain." Ali glanced toward the terminal. "Everything stable?" Damien looked back once more. Through the glass, the Sterling lounge glowed warmly, not as a fortress, but as a system functioning as designed. "Stable," Damien said. He climbed the stairs. The cabin door closed with its familiar hydraulic sigh. Inside, the scent of leather and bergamot met him again. The engines began a low, controlled spool. Outside, Sarah remained by the window, watching. The jet rolled forward smoothly, aligned with runway centerline. As it accelerated, the sunlight flashed briefly across its wings before it lifted cleanly into the sky. Inside the lounge, the jazz trio transitioned into a slower piece. Operations continued. On a highway miles away, a bus rumbled past a logistics depot at dusk. Preston stood at the stop, jacket zipped against the cold, thermos in hand. He watched the bus approach without resentment, just awareness. When it pulled up, he stepped on quietly. No one recognized him. No one needed to. The bus doors folded shut, with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Two very different vehicles moved through the same sky that evening. One climbed. One traveled steady. Both followed rules now understood, and neither needed to announce their arrival. The video resurfaced on a Thursday morning. It had never truly disappeared, but this time it climbed algorithm-fed and freshly captioned. Corporate karma. Lounge manager versus tech billionaire. By noon, it was trending again. Inside the Sterling Lounge, operations moved without disruption. Flights departed. Coffee poured. Staff rotated with quiet precision. Sarah stood in her office reviewing quarterly projections when Greg knocked lightly. "You should see this," he said, holding up his phone. She stepped beside him. The clip played silently at first, Preston shouting in the rain, the escort through the service corridor, the stunned faces reflected in glass. Someone had edited it tighter, sharper. Subtitles emphasized every misstep. Views ticked upward in real time. "Comments are getting louder," Greg added. Sarah exhaled slowly. "Let them." In Manhattan, Damien watched the same clip in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river. Muted. He didn't flinch. A junior analyst across the table shifted nervously. "Should we issue a statement?" "No," Damien said. The skyline shimmered under winter sun. Boats moved along the water like small mechanical thoughts. "It's a closed system," he added. "The outcome already stands." He slid the phone face down on the table. Across town at the logistics depot, Preston felt his pocket vibrate. He hesitated before checking. 3 new messages. One from an unknown number. One from an old colleague who hadn't spoken to him in months. One from a former lounge staffer. He didn't open them. The break room television flickered to life above the vending machine. Someone had pulled up the trending clip on a news segment. Example of power reversal in elite spaces. A driver laughed lightly. "That guy again." Preston kept his eyes on his coffee. No one looked at him directly. They didn't need to. Later that afternoon, Mike stepped into the dispatch booth. "You good?" Mike asked. "Yes." Mike studied him. "Internet can be loud." Preston nodded once. "I'm not running from it," he said quietly. Mike grunted approval and left. Back at Teterboro, a sleek black SUV rolled into the private lot. A camera crew stepped out, discreet but unmistakable. Sarah met them near the entrance. "We'd like a comment," the reporter said, "about the incident, about the transition." Sarah glanced through the glass toward the lounge interior. Guests were boarding calmly. Staff moved fluidly. "There was no incident," she said evenly. "There was a correction." The reporter tilted her head. "Do you regret how publicly it unfolded?" Sarah held the door open for an arriving pilot before answering. "Public behavior invites public consequence," she said. "That applies to everyone." The camera captured her in profile. The new signage reflected behind her. No hostility, no spectacle, just clarity. That evening, Damien landed briefly before continuing to Chicago. He stepped inside the lounge without announcement. No helicopter this time, no dramatic entrance. Sarah approached him with a tablet. "Media cycle's active," she said. "I saw. Do you want to address it?" Damien looked around. A pilot laughing with a mechanic. A young intern reviewing a checklist under Greg's guidance. No one whispering. "No," he said. "We build. We don't perform." He paused. "Has he responded?" Sarah shook her head. No public statement. Damien nodded. Silence can be growth. Or denial. He walked toward the window. Outside, dusk settled in layers of blue and violet. A departing jet's navigation lights blinked steadily against the darkening sky. His phone vibrated once more. A notification previewed a new article. "From power to pavement, where is he now?" Damien didn't open it. He turned the screen off. Across Newark, Preston stood alone in his small apartment, jacket hanging on a chair by the door. The television glowed softly in the corner. The same article headline crawled across the screen. He watched it fully this time. The anchor's tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't sympathetic either, just factual. A mistake, a fall, a new job, a lesson. Preston picked up his phone and opened the old messages at last. The one from the former staffer read, "I hope you're learning," he typed. "Yes." He erased it. Typed again. "I am." He sent it. No explanation. No defense. Just acknowledgement. Back at Teterboro, Damien boarded his jet as night settled fully. Inside the cabin, soft lighting replaced runway glare. He fastened his seatbelt and glanced once toward the terminal. Through glass, the Sterling lounge glowed steady and warm. No tremor, no spectacle, just continuity. The engines spooled smoothly, lifting the aircraft into dark sky. On the ground, in two different buildings miles apart, screens dimmed for the night. The internet moved on to its next outrage. But consequences didn't. They lingered quietly, measured not in clicks, but in choices. And the system, recalibrated, kept running. The problem with humiliation is that it lingers in the bloodstream. Preston told Hash he was rebuilding quietly. That steady work and silence would dull the memory. But silence isn't the same as surrender. Late one night, alone in his apartment, he opened a blank email addressed to a regional labor attorney. Subject, wrongful termination inquiry. He stared at the cursor blinking against the white screen. He began typing. I was publicly terminated without due process. The words felt structured, controlled, familiar, the kind of phrasing he used to deploy when correcting staff. He attached a screenshot of the viral clip, cropped carefully to omit context. He hesitated. Then he sent it. 2 days later, a response arrived. The attorney requested documentation, employment contracts, internal correspondence, evidence of procedural violation. Preston swallowed. He had none. Still, he pressed forward. He forwarded the inquiry to a media contact he vaguely remembered from his terminal days, a freelance journalist who once asked about luxury aviation trends. Subject line, abuse of corporate power. He framed himself as a casualty of spectacle, a victim of billionaire overreach. The journalist replied within hours. Do you have proof of misconduct on their side? Preston's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Proof. He replayed the memory of the red termination banner on the lounge screen, the timestamp, the scrolling complaints, the email headers. He didn't have access to those systems anymore. But pride is loud. He responded anyway. I was targeted, publicly humiliated. Systems were manipulated. The journalist requested a call. They spoke the following evening. Preston's voice was steady at first, controlled. He described the takeover as intimidation, as digital coercion. He omitted the insults, the service door, the rain. When the call ended, the journalist asked one final question. Is it true you had prior HR complaints? Preston froze. I don't recall, he said carefully. The article published 3 days later. Headline, Former lounge manager claims retaliation in high-profile terminal takeover. It circulated modestly at first. Then someone in the comments posted a link. A public record filing. Sterling Aviation Holdings, LLC, had submitted a formal transition audit the night of the acquisition. Attached were compliance reviews, time-stamped HR reports, and vendor discrepancy logs available through standard corporate transparency filings. The documentation was dry, methodical, unemotional, but devastating. Within hours, the article updated. Editor's note. Publicly available audit records contradict the claimant's assertion of procedural misconduct. Screenshots of Preston's internal email warnings appeared in the thread. Date stamped. Digitally signed. The journalist posted a follow-up clarification. No outrage, just correction. At the logistics depot, Preston felt the shift before he saw it. The glances were different, less neutral. Mike stepped into the dispatch booth mid-afternoon. You want to explain this? Mike asked, holding up his phone. The updated article filled the screen. Preston's mouth dried. I was defending myself, he said. By accusing people who documented everything? Mike's tone wasn't angry, just tired. You told the reporter systems were manipulated. They were. Mike tilted his head slightly. Or you just underestimated how thoroughly they were backed up. The hum of trucks outside filled the silence. Mike set the phone down on the small metal desk. I gave you a chance here, he said, because you said you were learning. I am. Learning means accepting consequence, Mike replied. Not rewriting it. Preston looked at his hands. They weren't shaking this time, just still. I didn't want to be the villain, he said quietly. Mike exhaled. Sometimes you don't get to choose that. You just choose what you do next. He picked up the phone. HR will contact you tomorrow. We don't need distractions. Preston nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He understood. Across the river in Manhattan, Damien received a brief notification about the updated article. He read the headline once, closed it. No statement issued. No legal response required. Documentation had done the work. Later that evening, Sarah reviewed vendor contracts when a secure message notification appeared on her tablet. Subject: External claim resolved. Attached: Compliance review summary, identical to what had already surfaced publicly. She smiled faintly. Systems protect themselves when built correctly. Outside the depot, Preston stood under a flickering streetlight. The air smelled of cold asphalt. His phone buzzed once more. A final message from the journalist. "I'm sorry. The records were clear." He didn't respond. For the first time, the instinct to fight back didn't rise. He slipped the phone into his pocket and looked toward the dark horizon. Overreach had cost him more than pride. It had cost him credibility. And credibility, he was learning, didn't regenerate on demand. It required time and proof. The bus arrived with a soft, pneumatic sigh. He stepped on quietly. No one knew his name. No one needed to. The doors folded shut. And this time, he didn't look back. 1 year later, winter arrived without drama. At Teterboro, the Sterling Lounge operated with the kind of efficiency that no longer needed to announce itself. Snow edged the runway in clean white lines. De-icing trucks moved methodically under pale morning light. Inside, warmth. Not just temperature, tone. A young pilot laughed with a line technician over a weather reroute. Greg, now finishing his final semester in computer science, reviewed a security dashboard between boarding calls. The jazz trio had been replaced by a seasonal playlist, subtle, instrumental, unobtrusive. Sarah stood in the office that once intimidated her. The whiteboards were cleaner now, fewer corrections, more forecasts. A soft knock interrupted her review. "Delivery," Greg said, stepping in. He handed her a thin folder, standard manila, nothing embossed. Return address, Newark Logistics Depot. She didn't need to open it to know. Inside was a printed performance review. Dispatcher, Carmichael, Preston. Attendance, perfect. Incidents, none. Supervisor notes, reliable, quiet, improved communication. Attached was a short handwritten note. "Miss Miller, I won't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I stayed. Pay, see." Sarah read it twice. No defensiveness, no performance. Just information. She walked out into the lounge, the folder resting lightly in her hands. Outside, a G700 rolled toward the terminal through thin snowfall. Not dramatic. Just punctual. Damien stepped in minutes later, coat collar dusted with white. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Sarah replied. She handed him the folder without commentary. He read the evaluation slowly, eyes moving without expression. The snowfall outside softened the runway edges, muting sound. The world felt briefly insulated. "He stayed," Sarah said quietly. "Yes," Damien replied. No celebration in his tone. No triumph. Just acknowledgement. "He didn't contest the follow-up audit," she added. "No more media contact. No disputes." Damien closed the folder. "Good." They stood by the window. A de-icing spray arced over a departing jet in a fine silver mist. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. Damien considered the question carefully. "Nothing," he said at first. Then he looked at her. "In 6 months, schedule a formal interview. Not here. At the smaller regional property. The one in White Plains?" "Yes." "For what position?" "Assistant operations." She studied his face. "That's a step down from what he had." "Exactly." Snowflakes tapped softly against the glass. "Why give him another chance?" she asked. Damien's reflection hovered faintly in the window beside the runway lights. "Because the system works both ways," he said. "Consequence and redemption use the same currency." She absorbed that. Behind them, a guest approached the concierge desk and thanked Greg by name. Not habit. Intention. Damien turned toward the exit. "Is Allie ready?" "Engines warming," Sarah said. He paused once more before stepping out. "You've built something stable," he told her. "We," she corrected. He nodded. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. The G700 stood quiet against the snowfall, wing edges gathering thin frost. Captain Ali saluted lightly as Damien approached. "Visibility's clear above 5,000 feet," Ali said. "Smooth climb." Damien glanced back toward the terminal. Through the glass, Sarah spoke with a new hire, explaining something with calm precision. Greg was laughing at something a mechanic said. No tension, no hierarchy heavy enough to bend the room. The aircraft door closed. Inside, the cabin lights warmed gradually. As the jet taxied, snow compressed under its tires with a soft, granular crunch. It accelerated down the runway and lifted cleanly into a gray winter sky. Below, the Sterling Lounge remained steady, glowing, consistent, unshaken. Across the state line, in a smaller office above a loading dock, Preston sat at a narrow desk reviewing delivery logs. A supervisor approached. "White Plains is hiring assistant ops," the supervisor said casually. "Internal recommendation needed." "Interested?" Preston paused. Snow fell beyond the small window beside him. "Yes," he said quietly. "No certainty. No entitlement. Just readiness." The supervisor nodded once and walked away. Preston looked down at his hands. They were steady. Outside, a freight truck reversed slowly into dock position, its warning beep echoing against concrete. Work. Measured, honest. Above the clouds, the G700 leveled into smooth air. Damien opened his laptop briefly, reviewing a proposal, then closed it again. For a moment, he simply watched the horizon line through the oval window. Power wasn't volume. It wasn't spectacle. It was structure. And structure, once corrected, could hold. Far below, in two different buildings connected by nothing more than consequence, the same lesson continued to circulate quietly. Respect compounds. Arrogance accrue interest. And in the long run, only one of them scales.